Because we like to make things complex. It distracts us from the real task of getting to know who we are and putting ourselves out there in the world. It's like, oh, let me just play with this intricate problem for a bit so I don't have to look at who I am and what I want and how I'm holding myself back. And we don't want to look at that because it's scary and it's uncomfortable, but it's only through looking at that we can become who we're meant to be and we can maximize our potential.
Welcome back, Punky Fusters. It's great to have you on the Few Podcast again with me, Boo, and the ever youthful, ever enigmatic superhero superstar, Sean Sill. Hey, Sean, how are you, mate?
Great, mate. The intros are getting better, so I like how you've been practicing that. So I appreciate that a lot. That's awesome.
Mate, that's all freestyle. That's freestyle intro right there. Hey, I've got a question though. We talk about people living their own versions of success, and I was wondering the last week or so, do you reckon Elon Musk still counts as one of the few, or has he just gone too far off the reservation?
I'd say that there must be a different category. I think there's Elon Musk and then the few that sit below that. I think he's just literally off into space somewhere else. Just can't compare with everyone else.
Yeah, I think it was. You're in a different stratosphere of life when you tweet to people, private citizens, how much tax you should pay, rather than the government tell you that. I think that's kind of massively wrong. Anyway, we digress. Let's get back into real people living their real dreams, their own versions of success. Today, I'm really excited about this podcast. I spoke to our guest a few weeks ago. Performance is my bag, baby. I love it. I think if you want anything in life, you've got to perform. There's no way to get around it. You've got some ideas on performance too, don't you, Sean?
I do, mate. Depends what type of performance you're talking about, but absolutely. Definitely been.
That we just blew 15 minutes talking about
the guitars and the singing, and our guest is a bit of a talented musician, I believe, as well. So
absolutely.
But let's get stuck in, mate. Let's get stuck in. It's not about us; it's about our guests.
No, it is about our guests, and we've got Dr. Gemma Munro on the Few Podcast today. Hey, Gemma, thanks so much for joining us.
Hello, Boo. Hi, Sean. It's a real pleasure. I'm excited to be here.
Great to have you on board. So I have to start off with it. In looking into your background info and having a bit of a deep dive into what you stand for, what you speak about, the public speaking you do, and the support and education and all those things, it came up with a reference to the Rolling Stones. Now, I'd love to hear a little bit more about that story because that one piqued my interest.
So it really was one of those cases where I thought, I haven't had a really interesting gig in a while. So just so you know, probably one of the first brave choices I ever made, and it's one of my keynotes is on making brave choices, was when I was 6 and my mum said, do you want to go to choir? And I, as a shy person, went, no. And the very last minute went, yes. And that opened up basically half of my life being about musical performance. So it's not a very cool musical performance story in that I've sung in really fabulous places like Westminster Abbey and Radio City Music Hall and Norwich Cathedral and St Martin in the Fields, but it's been very nerdy choral folk music. But I hadn't done one of those uber cool performances that leaves you buzzing in a while. And I just thought, that would be great to do one of those again. And literally within a day, the phone rang, and it was Carl Crossan, who's one of the most wonderful, amazing, best conductor in Australia. He went, hey, Gem, do you want to sing with the Rolling Stones? Is a bean green? Yes, of course I do. And so we were brought on, it was their stadium show. We were brought on to be, I think we were 12 backing vocalists for You Can't Always Get What You Want, which was their encore. And I speak for a living. I speak to big audiences, but I can tell you what, when you're about to sing to 53,000 people and Mick Jagger's that far away from you, you do think you're going to pee your pants. Luckily I didn't and made it through. And it really was one of those highlight moments, very almost heart-stopping, but I did get through it and I loved it.
That is incredible. What a story.
One of those things, isn't it, that really highlights that concept of energy. Like there's a palpable energy with a lot of people in a room that we just need to harness and understand. I think we too often play down that whole concept, but the energy at that moment in that room between you, Mick, the crowd, the other backup singers, that just must have been surreal.
Oh, it is. See, it's indescribable. I use words for a living, and I have no words. But it's why I'm one of those weird speakers who quite likes giving keynotes on Zoom. A lot of speakers don't. But you do then go back to now that we're coming out of COVID, you go back to the library and you go, oh, yeah, that's where it is, because you can bounce off that energy and then interact with it and think on your feet and change what you're going to say because you're reading the room. And I find that intensely rewarding.
Absolutely. And I've definitely seen that in, obviously all three of us are in the speaking game and running events and things like that. It's been a bit challenging over the last 18 months or so. And I've definitely found the same thing. We managed in December to get my group of like about 120 business owners back together for the first time since COVID had happened. We haven't managed to get them back together since, but the difference in energy and the lift by having everyone in that same place. And as you say, when I'm standing in front of an audience, I lift because of that, being able to adapt to reading the people in the audience and responding to that energy. And clearly, speaking to 120 or 500 people at doing a keynote or an event like that is not the same as singing with the Rolling Stones. So you've definitely got one up on us there. So that's awesome.
There's always time, Sean. There's always time.
There's always time. I could sing if there's
not that much time in the.
Not that much time. I think one of them's not here anymore. So maybe I'll take on the drumming role. or something. I don't know. But no, they've had an incredibly lengthy, successful, inspirational career. So it's amazing to see how they've had that level of longevity as a business. I mean, it's a band, but it's also a business. It also requires management, it requires leadership, it requires collaboration, it requires difficult conversations. And, it doesn't matter what it is, it goes to relationships. And, having been in a band for 13 years of my life as well in the past, we went through, I think, 8 different members in that 13 years. And that's because people didn't get on. They weren't values aligned. They didn't stand for the same things. And whether you're in a band or a business or a community group or whatever, I think the dynamics are the same, and it comes down to things like leadership and values and all that sort of stuff. And I know that you actually speak a lot about leadership and also about I suppose balancing the percentages when it comes to women in leadership. Maybe give us a little bit of background. Why are you passionate about that? What's driving you to sort of invest into that area?
Yeah, well, I guess there's 2 questions. There's the background and then the what's driving me. The background, very briefly, if I can sum it up, I went from academia to and doing a PhD in performance psychology because I've always been fascinated by success and fulfillment and performance and how those 3 things link together. For my sins, I realized that academics are talking to other academics. And I wanted to make an impact in the world. So for my sins, I got into executive recruitment for a few years and then in management consulting, which was 6 very stressful years, some of which were spent crying in the toilets at work. But it was an MBA. It was a 6-year-long MBA on how to get work done quickly, how to please clients, how to present, how to structure your language. I'm so grateful for it. But as I was doing that, I was pregnant with my second child, Abigail, and she was only given a 40% chance of survival in utero. And I actually had operations on her in me. So you never want to be known by the hospital. It was a pretty full-on situation. So all through the pregnancy, knowing she only had a 40% chance of making it, I found myself at the funeral of a 2-year-old boy who was the nephew of a very dear friend of mine, and he drowned in an accident. And there was that moment of life is too short to be doing what you're good at, as opposed to what you could be great at. And life is too short to be working 16, 17-hour days every day. And life is too short to not be going towards what it is you think you are here to do by being who it is you think you are here to be. And so at that stage, I started inkling. I'd also been working with a lot of women who were saying, I can't see a path for me up here. It seems too stressful. I'm not interested. And I thought, well, we have to change this. So I had 8 years of my first business, which was a complete ride, and turned it into a multi-million-dollar business. And we were working with Google and PayPal all around the world. But then I realized that, oh my gosh, I have to practice what I preach and make some brave choices, because it's not in alignment with who I am anymore. It had become the consulting firm that I had stepped away from. But also I was ready for new challenges. It had become a very operationalized, wonderfully run business where it was about processes and procedures as opposed to creating new content. And I'm here to create. And so I stepped away, and I stepped away also because, and this goes to what's driving me and why leadership is important to me. I kept seeing over a few years, I kept seeing everyone I worked with as this beautiful shining lamp. And over the years, and the light was always on, but over the years, they had added, or life had added, blankets over the light. And the blankets were limiting behaviors, expectations, chasing other people's dreams, beliefs that weren't actually true. And I became really passionate about helping people to rediscover that light. To give them the tools to shed those blankets that are in the way of that natural spark, and then to shine so brightly that they spark the light in others. And in terms of leadership, I realized that you were talking about organizations and how they function, how the Rolling Stones does exactly that. I realized that you can create all the culture change programs you want. You can look at changing an organization, changing the systems, but actually what an organization is its people. And what you actually need to do, I believe, to create change organizationally and to create a well-functioning organization is to help spark that light in others, because then they spark the light in others beyond that, and there's a ripple effect. And so I guess my role is actually throwing a few metaphorical stones into a few metaphorical ponds, and the rest takes care of itself.
Gemma.
Yes.
I want to go back to Rolling Stones and performers. You're in the field of performance, which is ironic given that you started in the field of performance, but it was a different type of performance. Where are the parallels between performance as a performer and a lot of people? I guess there's a paradox when it comes to rock stars and those labels, because as a performer and on stage as an entertainer, there's a lot of commonalities, isn't there, in terms of what you need to believe and what you need to do and showing up. The same way that a business leader does, except obviously the CEO can't have a bottle of Jack Daniels and cocaine all over the table like a rock star. So what are some of the parallels that you've seen between your life and journey as a performer and what it takes to perform inside an organization, whether you're a leader, a team member, or just an individual trying to get their own boxes ticked?
Yeah, Boo, that is a phenomenal question. And I think we could fill probably 2 whole podcasts with the answer. But what springs to mind is that a few things. Firstly, when you are engaging with your audience as a performer, you are fully present and you are there to give everything. I think Patti LuPone once said, "I've got it, now I'm giving it away." And I actually think the same is true of life. We are here to understand intimately what our strengths and talents are, and then to give those away. And in doing that, we light people up a little, or we make the world a slightly better place in whatever way is truest to us. I think another parallel is, as a performer, you have to conquer fear regularly. So it's not a matter of going, I just don't feel like getting up and performing today, because you've got people who are there and they've paid the money, and you are there to let your ego and your crap go so that you can get up on stage and give back to these people. And no matter what the fears or self-limiting beliefs, because we all have them, even seasoned performers, we need to put them to one side and say, actually, I'm here for a reason, and then just go fully into that reason. And then I think that the final thing I would say on that is that as a performer, you know that your role is not to give the audience and this is with speaking and singing and any kind of performance, it's not to give the audience one massive belt for an hour and a half. Your show has highs and lows, and you take people on a journey. And I think as we're living our lives, we can shy away from the highs and lows. It's like, no, it has to be good all the time. I'm going to avoid the lows. I'm going to avoid leaning into the discomfort. I'm going to avoid the sadness. But if you actually lean into life being a journey of ups and downs, you get a whole lot more out of it. And as a performer, when you do that for your audience, and I think a lot of speakers don't know the art of doing the ups and downs, your
Gemma,
audience
I was referred to that as the light and shade. Like
yes.
It's the light and the shade when it comes to music, and you see that in songs where they start off a bit slower, they build up, and whereas if you look at something like death metal, it's just on 11
yes.
in your face the entire time from start to finish. And that's just the light like blinding you. But that, and you're right too, is when it comes to whether it's performance, whether it's speaking, or whether it's leading, inspiring others, there has to be, and what as humans, our psychology looks for differences. It doesn't look for things that are the same.
Yeah.
It's like if you say to people, don't get your values and stick them up on the wall. If you stick them up on the wall after the third time you've walked past, you'll now ignore them from then on. They need to be dynamic, and it needs to be movement. So our eyes are looking for, our brain is looking for something different, not something that's the same. And
I had that conversation this morning with the CEO, and he's like, "Yeah, we're customer centric. We promote customer centricity. We've got posters all over the wall, but no one's customer centric.
Yeah.
Well, I don't understand it."
Absolutely. And you have to ask the CEO, when's the last time you actually talked to a customer? Because usually it's not for a very long time. And I so agree with you that light and shade, Sean, the best live performance I have ever seen was given by Tim Minchin in his back tour. It was like life in a nutshell. So he'd make you laugh, he'd make you cry, he'd make you laugh so hard you're about to throw up. And it was all the shades in between. And I think in living a life and leading an organization, we need to allow the shades of gray and also the highs and the lows, and not try and make it either all gray, which a lot of organizations do. It's like, do you know what? Let's just keep it safe here. Or not swing from high to low because you're wanting to keep it high. We actually need to allow those waves.
Yeah, it's such an important part of the journey for what's a life journey, it's a business journey, it's a leadership journey. It doesn't matter what it is. It's that thing of being able to understand that the lows is what gives you the strength, the knowledge, the growth, that evolution to then have it the high at a higher level the next time.
Absolutely. And one of the first guidelines I always set for any audience I speak to is to lean into discomfort and joy, because it's through the discomfort that we grow, but it's through the joy that it's almost like, if you allow me to get a little esoteric for a minute, I do believe the universe speaks to us in joy. It's like, that's the next step for you. That's the next step for you. So you need to lean into both, I think, to know what's next, to make great decisions, and to get the most out of any experience as well as life in general.
Gemma, with performance, okay, obviously it's your thing. One of the really interesting things I'm finding in organisations, and it plays to that grey a little bit, is often bosses say the problem with this place is there's no consequence. It doesn't matter if people do a bad job. And that got me kind of reading and researching a little bit, and really looking into the difference between need-based performance versus desire-based performance. Obviously, when you're singing and you're on stage, the consequence to poor performance there is extremely high and extremely personal. Where does that fit into? And it's great to be aspirational, right? And it's great to be positive, and it's great to have all of these positive thoughts moving forward. But when it comes to driving to be successful, and I know in my life there was very much a need component to it. How important is need to performance relative to just wanting?
I can honestly say I've never thought about that in my life. I think it has. To me, wanting trumps need, because you can need to perform and see it as something that's actually a threat. Whereas when you want to perform, it becomes an opportunity. So
let's say we need fire, water, shelter, food. We need that.
Yes.
So so that sits up at the top of our hierarchy of needs, and then we move into the what do we desire? And look, the only reason I talk about it is in really high performance environments like sport teams, where the consequence is losing and it's painful. They want to win, but they need to win as well. So I'm just curious as to, I guess the question is, can you be in organizational performance? Can you be too positive? Can you be too aspirational? Everyone gets a medal, everyone gets a ribbon? Is there
Yes, absolutely. And I've seen that my kids are, I have to think, because they have their birthdays at about this time of year, almost 11, almost 14. And there was a phase when they were in primary school where it was just, you get a medal and you get a medal and you get a medal. And we do need the pain of going, I didn't do that well. But I guess what I'm saying here is that pain becomes consequential to us when we want to achieve. So if we actually are wanting to do well, then what's happening is we're looking at how we can keep improving our performance. Whereas I think if it's purely need, then yes, we will do it, but we may not go the extra mile.
So it's not. I don't think it's all need or all want, and it's that balance, right? That's what I'm interested in, because then it becomes, well, what is the balance? Is it 4 points of need, 6 points of desire today, or does the universe just look out for you, and it'll just when you're riding high, boom, something will come out of left field and.
That's been my experience, Boo. I do think we're actually led on this path of growth, and that's how life works. It's expansion, contraction, and we move up to a next level because we want it. But then at that next level, an old devil comes up to bite us in the bum, and we go, darn, I thought I dealt with you, and we deal with it then, and then we keep going. I think you're right. It is a balance. It's like we achieve the next level because we want it, and then we need to address what's in our way to keep progressing. So you're right. It's absolutely a balance, and I think we've come up with an awesome Amazon best-selling model in the next, 2 weeks. Boo, what do you reckon?
As long as we can collaborate and I don't have to do anything, that sounds like a
just like on the podcast
here.
So. As they say, Boo, you're not even a pretty face, but and I think I was going to touch on there, Gemma, you said before and in the context of, you get an award and you get an award, and because you didn't get an award, I'm going to give you an award as well. And that's something that I've seen in being around I was on the board of Montessori school in Sydney for about 3.5 years when my kids went there, and both of them are a year younger than your kids, so similar ages. And the one thing I learnt in understanding the methodology behind it, and it's not just Montessori, there's other models that do similar, Steiner and Learn Life and others like that. But the concept of rewarding the effort, not the outcome, because the outcome is a consequence of the effort. Yeah. And the thing, as from a leadership perspective, if we're rewarding people for what they're doing solely, then it's going to be hollow. So like, Boo and Gemma, you hit your sales targets, here's a voucher, right? That's going to get old pretty quick. But if we actually focus on, and I want to get your view on this too, I believe if you focus on rewarding the person for who they are and how they're showing up, it's going to have a heck of a lot more impact than what they've achieved on its own.
I couldn't agree more. And when I work with leaders, I will often help them to start drilling down into each of their people's strengths and aspirations and blocks to achieving their aspirations. And the goal here is to stretch our people and reward them and give them feedback for using their strengths, moving towards their aspirations, and clearing their own blocks that are in the way of them achieving their aspirations, to the point where as a leader, you become an architect for someone else's career. And there's nothing more rewarding than that, looking back and going, I helped to shape this person and to give them this meaningful life and career. But I do think that one thing I would add to that is that organizations as a whole are falling into the trap of, it's almost a 1980s, 1990s mechanistic way of working. You need to do this, 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 almost factory line, without looking at, is this the right task for you to be doing versus you? Is this the right task? Is it going to lead us towards our goals as a business and help us meet our values as a business? And what you're ending up with is, and I see this all the time, a lot of people in organizations are feeling like they're stuck on this hamster wheel of, I get into work and there are 72 things on my to-do list and I'm in back-to-back meetings and I don't get to them, and then I get home and I'm exhausted, and then I go to Netflix or wine, or Netflix and wine, get up, caffeinate, the list has grown to 128 things. And part of that is because organizations aren't actually taking a good look at what are the strengths and aspirations and blocks of each individual, and are the things we are setting them and rewarding them for in line with who they are and where they want to go and where we want this organization to go.
But we've created chaos though. That's this whole bullshit theory of, hey, freedom within a framework, and you have all the time. Like, you know, I came from a world as a fighter pilot that was insanely structured, but at the same time incredibly flexible, because the world and that you operated in was incredibly random, and it just did stuff, whether weapons, baddies, goodies, whatever, right? For me, I think we've fallen into this trap of allowing everyone to look at everything a different way. So every day, yeah, we have tasks now. We used to have procedures. We used to do the basic stuff the same way. And not because we were slaves to the old process, because, hey, if everyone just does it this way, then we don't have to worry about it. It becomes an automatic program within our heads. That means all the time we waste doing basic stuff, we can put in a higher order thinking. And what I had this conversation with a huge company the other day, and we looked at a failed strategy over a year. And at the end of it, they're like, when you look at it like that, it's like we didn't even think about what we were doing. We didn't even. It's so obvious now. Why didn't we just stop and think about it? What do you think, Gemma? Are we, with automation and the flood of information now, are we slowly losing the ability to think critically?
I think we are. I think we're losing the time to think critically. I think most people are overwhelmed, overloaded. So it's like, okay, I've just got to put one foot in front of the other. I'm not actually thinking about, is this the right step? And I couldn't agree with you more. Even though I love flow, and when I write and I speak, I'm in flow, and I actually set 2 days a week for flow days where I don't have schedules, I don't have deadlines. I also set up my life to be incredibly routinized and ritualized. So I've got my morning routine, I've got my workday startup routine, I've got my evening routine, so that my general manager, the wonderful Stacey Packer, always says that structure gives us freedom. So I do think that organizations needed to do a better job of stepping back, going, what are the, as you say, what are the basic tasks that need to get done to fuel this business, to fuel our people? Let's make that part and parcel of what we do. And then let's let people loose to actually think critically, to give of themselves, to contribute in a way that only they can in the organization. And that's what people are looking for. And they're leaving organizations in droves because they're not getting that opportunity for freedom and authenticity at work.
I think that you're right there. The whole concept of structure to support that. And I used to, I suppose, had this. My ego. Let's just call it for what it is. My ego had this thing that's like, I got into business, so I don't have to be told to do anything, right? So I do anything whenever I want. Doesn't work, right? And it took me many years to finally realize that I actually needed structure to create a foundation to build on top of. Without that, I was like free falling and I could do anything whenever I wanted, yes. But without deliberate structure, without a deliberate direction, things like a mission, and a strategic plan and an execution framework, and these things that say, okay, you need to do these things this week. But it's not saying you've got 10 hours a day allocated 1 minute at a time for the entire week. You've actually got, there's 2 hours of this that needs to be done. You need to do this, it's going to take you about 90 minutes. You need to do that, it's going to take about an hour. Yeah, I can fit wherever I want in the week. So it gives you a lot more, what I found is a lot more, that outline or the border, the structure, the framework gives you a lot more fluidity to, as you said, have the critical thinking time. And I haven't actually heard it expressed like that before. That's actually, that it's a time issue. And I have to agree absolutely that most people are so busy with all the noise, whether it's people can't go for like 5 seconds without, if they've got to wait for the bus is pulling up, they'll, swipe 3 times on Facebook before they get on the bus. They can't just stand there and wait for the bus to come. So if we're not opening up those opportunities to think, I think we're missing it. So how do you, Gemma, what do you think are some ways where people could actually open up that creative space, that strategic thinking space more?
Yeah, I've got a few things that I do, and this has been trial and error over many years. And sometimes I still get it wrong, where it's like, oh, I'm really in hustle and overdrive today, and I need to move back into flow. And then sometimes I get lost in flow. Oh yeah, that's right. I need the structures, and I actually see them as an infinity loop. You can't have one without the other. But for me, there are a couple of things that really work. One is I have non-negotiable balcony time, as in stepping up off the balcony every day. On Monday, I have usually an hour and a half in the morning, and I've got set questions I ask myself, like what's going well, what's not going well, am I playing to my strengths, where am I at with my vision, what are the next steps I can do this week, what am I doing that's getting in the way, how can I address that? And then I'll have balcony time about half an hour to an hour at the start of each day. Again, just to have a look at the whole day. And I set myself some, I actually call it thought leader time, which is possibly a little naff, but it's to explore what are my thoughts on things, and to have that critical thinking time. That's made a huge difference. The other thing is carving out space to listen to that small, still voice within. And for me, that is meditation. I meditate each morning. I also have breaks interspersed throughout the day where I'll go outside, I'll be in nature, I'll water my veggies. And it sounds, we make the mistake of thinking it's not linked to performance. It is fundamentally linked to performance, to have that space to listen to that small, still voice. Because that small, still voice, when you're away from the beta brain waves, which are all about fight, flight, what's wrong, what do I need to do? And you move into those alpha brainwaves, which are about what are the possibilities? How can I be creative here? You actually start to hear things that help you move to your next level of success and fulfillment. And even in listening to the small, still voice, I literally woke up one morning and the small, still voice said, get yourself to Patch Kitchen and Garden, which is a restaurant here in the Adelaide Hills. I was like, oh, I don't want to, I've got to do laundry. But I got used to listening to it. So I went to Patch and I had lunch, and there was my current partner of 3 years, because the small, still voice had said, here's the next step. And I went, okay, I better go do it.
Yeah, there is, those inner voices are so important. And I remember when I used to have that moment, and it'd be like 10 in the morning, and you'd be like, oh man, it's just not happening today, not happening, and you'd push through and you'd sit there and you'd procrastinate, you'd faff. Whereas now I just walk away, do something irrelevant. And if that turns into a whole day of nothing for me, it's like the way French eat food, right? Like, because the food is so rich and so tasty and it's so full of fats that you just cannot eat it the next day. It's just too much. And I think performance can be a bit like that. And I think leaders who value FaceTime performance, hang on, let me flip that around. What would you say to leaders who value FaceTime performance, who believe that you have to be in the room for me to, as a leader, to pull a lever? My expectation is for you to be here and be available all the time. What's your advice for someone like that?
I would have to read that person to formulate how I would give the advice, but the essential message would be that's BS.
But look at it. Look what's happening. It's post-COVID, and this big cultural revolution of working from home is starting to be rapidly nullified. More and more organisations are saying you've got to be back in the office.
And I think one of the reasons I do what I do, and I continue to work in corporates, is that organizations will start to crumble if they don't make fundamental shifts in how they lead their people, and in making sure their people get to work feeling lit up and have opportunities to be lit up within the workplace. And I think saying to people, you need to be at my beck and call. I need to be able to see you, to trust you. I'm going to fill up your calendar with back-to-back meetings all day. So any work you have to do will be after you've put the kids to bed or you've had dinner and your brain is exhausted anyway. It's a recipe for disaster, as my dear mother would used to say when we were doing things that were naughty when we were children. It just it doesn't work. Not only does it not work, it's going to drive your people away. So for those who are insisting on FaceTime performance, I would be gently but firmly coaching them to look at their own beliefs around that, their own trust in themselves to do the work when they say they will, and what's getting in the way of them trusting their people. And I'd be delving into that.
Let's be straight up, Gemma. Like, I've worked with a lot of corporate. You've worked with a lot of corporates. Your whole concept wouldn't exist if corporates weren't doing things like be there, FaceTime, be grey. It's endemic in groups of large people. What is it? Why does it just this way of thinking and doing things become so ingrained? Like, what is it about humanity that drives this grey herd behaviour?
Oh, I would very much point to Bandura's social learning theory, where, and I've seen this so much. I've worked with spunky, amazing people who then get thrust into a leadership role, and we go, oh, that's how leadership is done. So do you know what? I'm going to button myself down and veneer myself off and become what I think a leader is, because we learn by watching others. And we've inherited this system of leadership and of running organizations that started with the Industrial Revolution, went through to factory work, and now we're still imitating the 1980s and 1990s push, 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 hustle, 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 force, force, force. We haven't been given an alternative. And at the moment, if we know it's not working, we don't have the space to consider what an alternative would look like. So I think part of the work I do in corporates, and I do work with entrepreneurs as well, is to provide them that space and give them those tools to create micro and macro mindset shifts and behavior shifts to completely overhaul how leadership and life and work get done. Because if we keep going like this, we are going nowhere fast.
I have to agree that, and I think a big element of that I see, Boo, as well, is it's an element of control. If you can see people and they're in there, you can control what they're doing. You can make sure they're sitting at their desk at the right time. They're getting there on time. They're starting, they're stopping. To me, there's an element of that fear that if you let go and give people the opportunity to actually step up, and a lot of people will take the piss, don't get me wrong. Some people will. You know, and the thing is, what you're saying too, Gemma, goes back to what we were talking about earlier in the piece, that performance, that, that's how a leader is supposed to act. So I need to show up and pretend like that's who I am to be a good leader. Yes. And it's such a big mistake. And I see this as well because my focus is small to medium business, not so much the corporates, but it's the same. It's still a people game. And the thing is, it exists. But as a leader, we need to show up as us. Now, if someone doesn't like us as a leader, but being authentically us, then they should bugger off and someone else can come along, right? But if we put on this act, no one's going to know who the hell we are. Some people may like us, but we're actually liking the bit that we're putting on and not the real bit. So how do you believe people can make that step into being much more
It's like that risk of when you're dating, when you're young and you go, oh, Mom, Dad, what am I going to do? And they go and be yourself. And you're like, oh, who the fuck is that?
Who's that?
That's it.
I know. I'd say a couple of things to that question. First is there's an amazing quote by Danielle Laporte. She writes that well-roundedness is overrated. You'll always be too much of something for someone. You'll be too brash or too shy or too loud or too quiet. But when you round out your edges, you lose your edge. And I've seen so often that actually the things that we think are horrendous about ourselves that don't fit in with society are the things that give us our edge. I still remember getting feedback when I was working in management consulting of, you're too passionate when you talk to be taken seriously. And I tried for 6 months. I was like hammering out that passion, I'm going to rock up as a tremendously serious management consultant. And then I realized, hang on, I'm not too passionate to speak. I'm too passionate for this workplace. And I now ironically have a very serious speaking career around helping people with their passion and their purpose. So it's amusing. But the second thing I would say is that in finding your edge, often I'll ask people the question, if you had to take some kind of potion that made it impossible to be anything other than who you are at work, what are the 1 to 3 tweaks or changes we would see in the workplace if you rocked up more as yourself. And it's amazing how, as you become more of yourself, your followership, if you're a leader, it grows and it's more engaged. And also your relationships become more trusting, which you pointed out, Sean, because whenever you meet someone who you know is not being fully themselves, the BS meter goes up. It's like ding, ding, ding. And we don't trust that person. We don't want to work with them. We certainly don't share ourselves. So to me, authenticity is one of the keys in transforming leadership for the better.
And I run a process with my clients that I work with, the leader, to define it, who you actually aspire to be, not who you are now. So it's defining, as a leader, who are you aspiring to be, not like Joe Bloggs down the road, or this person who's really obnoxious. You. What do you want someone to say at your eulogy at your funeral in 20, 30, 50 years time, whatever it is? What would you like somebody to say about you? I was a bit of a clown who had crap dad jokes, or, it was always there, generous, humble, really authentic in how he showed up and helped a lot of people. Like, what is it that, and it's just, again, there's the skin that you wear in all situations. It's just you expressing yourself fully.
Yeah, it's you fully bare. And I do think the deathbed test is a wonderful one. You might have read the book, The Top Regrets of the Dying, by palliative care nurse Bronnie Ware. And the number one regret is not living a life that's true to who you are. And I do think that's why I do what I do. That's how I do what I do. And I encourage people to think about that. So I think that eulogy example is really phenomenal. The only thing I'd add here is sometimes when we go to set what is my ideal version of myself, we end up thinking about what is society's ideal version of me. I'd own a yacht and I'd do this, and actually it doesn't matter to us. And I always think about my friend Hannah. I'll call her that because that is her name. She's a diplomat, very high level diplomat. And when people meet her, they think, my gosh, it's like I've been touched by an angel. And I've got a snowball's chance in hell of achieving that. That's not the effect I have on others. That's not my ideal self. But can I challenge people and motivate people and inspire people and give them a gentle but well-placed kick up the bum sometimes? Yes, I can do that. So I think as long as we're situating that ideal self in actually who am I and who do I want to be deep down, as opposed to what I think others want me to be, then it's a fabulous question to ask.
I think we're kindred spirits.
I mean, for me, my entire life, I've never given a shit what anyone's thought about me. Even school reunions, they're like, dude, you haven't changed. You do not care. So when you have that mindset, right, you don't end up worrying about, what do I want to be and what do I want to. You just get busy doing stuff, right? You're just like, oh, that looks like an interesting thing. And I was talking to a gentleman this morning about, it's like, I've got no leadership capability in my business, 90 people. What's some really basic leadership skills you can help us with? And I'm like, well, be selfless and maybe do stuff that's purposeful, like do stuff that has a reason behind it, and just start there. Like, oh, what about personalities? And you just sort of kind of said it, guys. It's like, personality is irrelevant. It doesn't matter whether you're introverted or extroverted. None of that matters. Like, if you're well-intentioned and you care about other people, like, people are going to get on board with you. Like, they're going to trust you. And when they trust you, everything's going to accelerate, right? So why do we manufacture so many complex, like the international leadership development industry is like a $250 billion industry.
Yeah.
Why? It's so damn hard.
Yeah. Because we like to make things complex. It distracts us from the real task of getting to know who we are and putting ourselves out there in the world. It's like, let me just play with this intricate problem for a bit, so I don't have to look at who I am and what I want and how I'm holding myself back. And we don't want to look at that because it's scary and it's uncomfortable, but it's only through looking at that we can become who we're meant to be and we can maximize our potential.
Absolutely. That's the most challenging part of the journey. And you said it before, Gemma, I think we're kindred spirits when you said you're never going to be that one that's like touched by an angel, but you can kick people up the arse when they need it sometimes. Because in the past, I was told by a number of people, including one of my early mentors, that you're too direct, right? Your approach is too direct. You need to soften it and all that sort of stuff. Well, to my clients now, I'm known as the sledgehammer, right? And they love it because no one else is going to call them on their bullshit. So that's my job. So I don't need to become
mate,
this.
Now when you get up on stage.
That's it, sledgehammer. Yeah, mind you, I mean, it has softened. The sledgehammer has softened over time because I've found other ways of communicating. But I can sing that one on stage.
You've got other tools in your toolkit now, Sean.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. But rather than being a tool early on was probably more ego-driven. But it does make a difference. But so, and we touched on, and this is something that we touched on a lot in the episodes of The Few, is purpose. How important do you feel purpose is for you and for other people to really, chase that down and bring that in to give them that intrinsic
and your journey with purpose, Gemma, because obviously from being in a choir and all of these, your purpose when you were 21 wasn't, hey, I'm going to have a doctorate in psychology around performance and be on the speaker circuit. I don't think any speaker has that ambition when they start. So tell us about your journey, like your purposeful journey, and how that can look like for people who struggle with not being in their purpose right now.
Yeah, I used to believe that let me say that again. I still believe that purpose is everything, but I used to believe that it had to be very well defined, and this is what it looks like. So you've got this beautifully packaged dream or vision, and you've got 12 steps to get there. And I now know that's completely irrelevant. I think purpose is incredibly important, but I think it can be ill-defined. I think it can be, I want to feel this way. I want to make this kind of impact on everyone I meet, because our purpose is actually lived out in every interaction, in every moment. And people used to come up with 5-year business plans or 5-year personal growth plans. That's impossible now. Look back 5 years, there is no way I would have thought I would be out of my marriage, in a wonderful new relationship, in a wonderful new business. My life was going in a certain direction, but in keeping on tuning into what's my purpose now, where are my values at, what's my next step for my growth, that leads us towards our purpose. And it can be this beautiful, vague, dreamy picture, but as long as we've got that sense of my big why I'm here, what I want to give, that's all we need. Doesn't need to be set out in stone, because it's going to change multiple times every 5 years, if not every year.
Hey, there's something that I reckon I've just picked up on The Few, mate, is either everyone is divorced or is single, but in new and better relationships. Therefore,
there has been a very big theme. I did think that as you were saying that, Gemma, I'm like, okay, so this seems to be a common thread, but I have seen this where people who have a very big focus on personal growth and development, we can, and I don't mean this in any negative way to past partners or wives, husbands,
who probably don't listen to the show
just
anyway,
different.
Let's be honest.
Yeah, that's that. But the point is that we become different versions of. So when we meet someone, so it's kind of aligned, but over time there can be a gap created between who you are and who you're showing up as and what your values are versus another person. So they might change in another direction, or they may stay on the same path. And I've found that, I have seen that a lot in people that have had quite dramatic growth and evolution within themselves and who they are and the impact that they're making, that it quite often ends in them having to exit a long-term relationship and move to find someone aligned with who they are at that point in time. Maybe you can speak to that.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. I had a huge period of growth and awakening, and also I got married at 26. Who knows who they are at 26? I certainly didn't. I thought I knew. But I do think as we head to 40, Jung actually talks about how the first 40 years of our lives are about putting ourselves out into the world. And then we move more into looking at who we are and looking within. And as you start to look within, you have realizations like, I can't be who I am in this partnership. I can't. I'm not seen for who I am in this partnership, and I can't grow into who I want to be in this partnership. And I think if you're with someone and your partner is equally committed to growth and to growing their perceptions of you, I absolutely think it's doable. And I still think there are some times where your partner's growing and you're just growing in different directions. And it's hard and difficult, but you know that without letting go of the relationship, you will actually stay as who you are in a bud, as opposed to blossoming to who to be.
Absolutely agree. And my kid's mum, my ex, we had a discussion a few months ago, and it was quite an open discussion, quite, amicable. And I mean, it has been very amicable anyway throughout the process. But the discussion was around the fact that both of us have identified, her included, that each of us have grown substantially since 18 months ago when we exited the relationship after 19, nearly 20 years, that both of us have seen a massive change in each other, and that both of us agree that we couldn't have had that had we stayed where we were, and we probably were in that for a number of years longer than was actually serving either of us and even the kids, and it was something that I was very happy to see that she'd realised that as well, that she'd had opportunity to now grow, being on her own for a while and in her own new relationship and things like that, and likewise, that it was that chance to then more rapidly evolve again, because that relationship had served each other to a point, but it's like it's actually no longer serving either of us anymore, or the family unit. We need to make a change. And whilst that's one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, it was definitely the right thing, absolutely. And I can see the positives of that, the benefits of that, and I think it's an old stigma around that says if you marry someone, you got to be with them for the rest of your till death do your part. I don't think that's actually, maybe it's until you become people that aren't serving each other anymore, and then you respectfully give each other that opportunity to go and find the next person that can help them to evolve.
Where's the few people who are performance driven also need to be careful because of the nature of who we are for anyone else as well, right? Like, people haven't had your journey, Gemma. They haven't had yours, Sean. They haven't had that drive. They haven't had this intangible that sits there, and therefore, I think in terms of absolutely no one's perfect. I think with a performance mindset, there is a risk of leaving not just your partners, but a lot of other people in the dust a little bit as well. Just because of the different relationships everyone has with fear, the different relationships they have with their personal growth journeys, and as humanity, we've got to be respectful of that. So I think there's an introspective piece here as well, which is, hey, how do we manage that? How do you dial it down? And I find, Gemma, inside an organisation, when you're working with the high performers and the really effective, productive leadership, they've got a totally different problem set, but it's still a problem set compared to trying to motivate the rest of the group. Have you got any insights on? I kind of call it the dark side of performance. Have you got any thoughts on that as well?
Yeah, I take Sean's point and your point. For me, relationships they're the biggest fuel for helping us understand and rub off the rough edges, and to help us. They're like this beautiful mirror for, oh my gosh, here's a problem in me. Here's what I need to look at in me. So I don't think it's about being in a relationship, and I'll get to the performance part in a bit, but being in a relationship and going, oh, this isn't working for me anymore. It's too hard. I'm off. I think it's about, for me, relationships need to have a beautiful blend of chemistry and friction. And the friction is to propel us to grow, and the chemistry is just to make it fun along the way. And if one or both of those things go, then that's the time for the relationship to end, not when we're not rubbing each other up the wrong way, because we always will. So I do think, back to your point, Boo, around the dark side of performance, I think it can be a little bit, well, I've outgrown you, I've outgrown this relationship, I've outgrown this organization. And as you say, leaving people in your wake, as opposed to going, this is really pushing my buttons. It's really triggering me. I can use that dark side of the coin of high performance and get out of here. Or I can use it to actually focus on, what's this bringing up in me? How do I need to grow? And staying the path until that lesson is learned. And when all the lessons are learned, then we move on.
Absolutely. It's that highlighting the other people, the mirror or the light that highlights the shadow in us, and the bit that we need to start to shine some light on. And whether we like it or not, it's challenging. It's difficult. And being in a incredible relationship now for about 7 months at the time of recording this, that's had lots of challenges along the way, because there's a whole new set of mirrors that have popped up, and I'm just going, oh shit, I thought I did all this work. Now there's all these new mirrors that are different angles that are coming up, and all the edges of the diamond that are still rough that I couldn't see before. And it's just like, okay, here we go again. Awesome.
I know.
Let's do it.
And also at the same time, you've got wounds from having left a marriage, and it's just, it's such hard work. And then you move from the honeymoon stage and you just go, oh yeah, right. Yeah, you do leave the lid off on the toothpaste, and you are an annoying human as opposed to this angel sent from above. It's tough.
Yeah. It's human. I guess it's human nature, and I think for where you see those really effective people that become leaders, where they really start to fall down is they end up with that frustration and resentment fermenting within their team. In that, can't you guys just lift and come along with me? And the team's like, where are you going? Like,
yes,
that those sort of tensions that exist organizationally, I think is an area where, and it's that you kind of said it, like there's never a win. You lift people up and their performance increases, and they hit the jets and away they go, and then all of a sudden, oh, we just created another problem. Now we've got to bring it back down a bit and keep it. It's this constant sine wave of that for me is this deep performance mindset, which is it's the mean of the sine wave that counts, not the sine wave itself. If you can have your ups and downs and lift it to be, consistently above average rather than periodically above average. And I think that's where you see people like, the Warren Buffetts of the world, the Tom Bradys, the Roger Federers, these people that they don't win all the time, but they win just that little bit more than everyone else, and they have a more rounded life, a more selfless view of the world. And sometimes people are born with that. For the rest of us, I'm certainly not that selfless, and I could never be a Roger Federer or patient like a Warren Buffett to be $1 billion investor. I'd get too much like itchy feet. So I think how did you find your swim lane then, Gemma? Because of it, people can say you can be anything, but you don't want to be anything. So how did you? At which time did you go? I've got conviction in this. I'm in my lane now, and now I'm really going to accelerate. What happened?
Yeah, the consistent thing for me in finding my lane has been unapologetically understanding, honing, and maximizing my strengths. So I've had several epiphanies throughout my career that have all involved, oh, hang on, yeah, right, these are my strengths. So I still remember in management consulting, I was doing organizational redesigns and Salesforce effectiveness. And I did the Clifton Strengths. For those who haven't done that, it's highly worth I think, 29 Australian dollars investment. And I had my firstborn in a cot next to me. I remember the exact moment where I was looking at my strengths of developer and maximizer and activator and going, yeah, I don't think I'm meant to be redesigning Salesforces. I'm meant to be in leadership and people development. And when I came back from maternity leave, I said to my boss, can I transfer? Can I do this as a job now? And bless him, he said yes. And then that led to me working in leadership development. It led to me speaking for a living. And then the other aha moment I had when it came to the strengths was when I knew it was time to sell my business that I'd created and was my baby. Because I couldn't play to my strengths of activator and creator and being strategic. So that the strengths in combination with there is this problem that I want to fix. So with my first business, it was around how do we lift the balance of the gender balance at leadership level? How do we drive that? And it got to the stage where the programs I'd created, 60% of the women who did them would receive a promotion within 6 months, because it was about measuring how we can actually fix that problem. And then now in my current speaking work and leadership programs, it's about how can we uplift entire teams, entire organizations by transforming one individual, one heart and mind at a time. And I'm fascinated by that problem. So I use my strengths to solve problems that really get me motivated to get up in the morning.
I think you're totally right. You have to do it one at a time. You can't just do the blanket. Here's 100 people. Here's how you all need to be a leader. Go and lead and give us all our outcomes and make us hit our budget for the quarter. Like it doesn't work like that. So,
oh no.
But
and
definitely,
here's the change program. Buy into it. It's great for the business.
We're excited about it, so you should be too. So
get rich from this, so work harder for me.
Yeah, that's it. I'll look excited, so you work harder. But clearly, you've had a colourful journey and lots of ups and downs and challenges and the roller coaster of life, business, all the rest of it. If you could take some of those lessons that you've learnt over the years and go back to a younger version of yourself, so maybe the version of yourself that said yes to the choir, which is interesting because I did exactly the same thing in primary school when I was like scared crapless for some reason. I said yes at the last minute, got me into singing. But if you go back to that younger version of yourself, or maybe a teenage version of yourself, with some of the key lessons you've learnt now that you know now, what would you go back and teach yourself?
Oh, so much. I would save myself a whole lot of pain, but funnily enough, of course, it's through the pain that we grow. But I would say probably a couple of things that seem paradoxical, but the definition of maturity is apparently being able to hold two competing positions at the same time. So on one hand, I'd be saying, do you know what? Just get on with it, honey. Like, you're not that important. Research shows that people are thinking about us 50% less often than we think they're thinking about us. So stop over worrying, overthinking, over analyzing what people are thinking of you, what you should be doing, what society expects of you, what your parents expect of you, and just get on with it. But at the same time, as well as saying you're not that important, I'd also be saying you are important and you've got things to do and say and contribute, and you've got natural strengths and gifts and deep experience that actually makes you uniquely positioned to do what you are here to do. And I think that's the same for everyone. So hone in on that and unapologetically play to that.
I read a statistic somewhere once, 85% of people think they're in the top 25% of intellect inside their organisation. So
sounds about right.
Hey, Gemma, thanks so much for taking the time to have a pretty wide-ranging conversation. This is our first podcast we've dealt into all our personal divorces and relationship failures. So, whichever, I think it's an important topic. I think we've got to go there. It's all part of the rich tapestry of life. So, thanks so much. I've got about 8 more questions, but unfortunately, we've run out of time. But thanks again, Gemma, for coming on the show.
And that wraps up another episode of The Few. Thank you to our partners, Afterburner, for team building, development and alignment. We understand now how important it is to have the right people around you. Get them on board with where you want to go. Momentum Media, the largest industry publisher in the country, connecting your business to the Australian community. ICMI, Australia's premier speaker bureau, representing the few that do fulfill their life's purpose. And finally, Sean's Inner Circle, the business coaching organisation for small and medium enterprises looking to make that next step. Thanks again for listening in and downloading today. Please leave a review on whatever platform you are currently listening to this podcast, and reach out to our partners who can help you make the transition to the few.
Thanks so much, Gemma.
Oh, it's been a real pleasure. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
We'll be right back.